Um, First and foremost, Shailesh, wonderful. The amount of stuff that you have done in the last 5 years, apart from that, so many years in India, uh, we don't need to do anything other than just follow whatever you have done. So I just want to say a big thanks to you on behalf of the industry. And also I want to thank all the senior leaders in this room for making this India pharma industry as where it is today. It's got an unbelievable task. Last 50 years, the industry where it used to be and where it is today, and we're calling it the pharmaceutical capital of the world, pharmacy of the world, all those terms that we use, it doesn't happen by chance. It has happened by strong leadership and making things happen. So I just want to say, Shailesh, thanks for transiting the mantle to me, and it's a tough act to follow, but I will do my level best to support and be of service to the industry. And I would like to give a big round of applause to Shailesh. Can you please join me in doing that? I also want to recognize Dr. Reddy Garu. Namaskaram. It's a great honor to be with senior leaders like you who have brought pride to this country as somebody who can fundamentally do some work. And there are other industry leaders out there like you who made India proud. So thanks very much for being here. And obviously, we will have a chance to listen to your speech subsequent to my talk. So first and foremost, what I want to communicate is a contextualization of the situation or the animal that we are dealing with right now. Typically, what happens is that in an industry journey, sometimes it's a good idea to take a look back and say the journey that we have been in, and what stage are we in? Do we have the right kind of strategies to deal with the challenges that we are facing as an industry? If you look back from 1950s to 1960s, where the doctors used to take care of the patient, following the Hippocrates theory of do no harm to patients and kindliness, care, and concern, doctors played a very big role in this country, and the charitable institutions played a big role as a provider and payers. And the medicine used to be dispensed through these compounders who used to make their own medicines. Then came the industrialization of medicines. So the industry joined hands with doctors in making sure the patients get the kind of treatment that they need to get. In 1945, the longevity of the population is about 45, and today our average longevity is 67. Many of the metro towns, we are talking about 90. We are talking about the immense contribution that is done by the industry along with the doctors is phenomenal. I don't know whether we recognize the contribution made by the industry over a period of 30 to 40 years have made people to live longer. We all know many of our elderly relatives used to die of simple acne infection. People used to die of stomach ulcers. Forget about cancer. I'm talking about some of the simple diseases where people used to die in India. Today, people don't die of those diseases. As the evolution started, unlike in other countries, where countries like Korea, Japan, to some extent China, but many of those countries, they decided to set up an infrastructure or a healthcare system, which is a very comprehensive system, where they define protocols across the population, what should be the medicine, what should be the healthcare solution, and they had a funding mechanism, reimbursement mechanisms. They put a fundamental healthcare system in place, and as the economy evolved, they were in a position to tweak and modify. But very unique is that India is the only place where we kept our healthcare system, which is what was meant to take care of the communicable disease with our primary healthcare centers and community CHCs and PHCs and general hospital, district headquarter hospitals. And quite obviously, we didn't change with the time. And the funding mechanism did not change with the time. And the spending pattern related to how people consume consumer products the same way people are consuming healthcare. So quite obviously, the compromised patients were consuming healthcare through bargains at the point of healthcare is being delivered. These are all sure recipe for a disaster of poor quality healthcare outcomes. Now, in this process, there are only one or two members in the ecosystem who were made accountable. That's primarily the pharma industry, which was evolving. So the policymakers could see how the pharma industry can contribute, and they started having a visibility of how the pharma industry is operating. The other one is the physicians through the MCI. Whether we like it or not, the private healthcare started taking root, and it was operating at a random basis in a nice way, because what the government could not provide, the private healthcare took charge and they started delivering. Now, the reason why I'm contextualizing, unlike in other countries where we do not have a comprehensive healthcare system with a well-defined patient care pathway. Today, a patient, if he's sick, he or she goes to somebody whom he knows, nearby, next door neighbor. What happens to the patient after going to the next door physician? There is no defined pathway, and there is no capture of data, and there is no comprehensive healthcare delivery that can happen across the country. What happens in South will not necessarily happen in East. Aravind Eye Hospital, what they do, 500,000 cataract surgery at $50 is not replicable to Bihar, where still people are suffering from blindness that can be prevented. So we have a fundamental issue, but this is a choice that we made as a country. So what happens with that? This is what happens. The blue button is true. When you press the blue button, then the red button is false. Now, we are in this whole paradigm of uncertainty. People don't know who's right. If the pharma industry is doing their business correct, whether the doctors are doing their job well, whether the providers are looting or they are delivering healthcare, or the NGOs are being too emotional, not understanding how this all can make a big difference. Device makers, how they participate in this whole evolving healthcare system. So we currently have in India a fluid healthcare system where it requires the flexible leadership of industry leaders like us, where we continuously figuring out what's going to happen next. Now, is that a good situation to be in? Definitely not. So when you are in a context where continuously people are second guessing what's going to happen to me next, MCI, the doctors are wondering what is going to happen to me. Providers are saying what's going to happen to my margins, my viability. Pharma industry is wondering price controls. And health insurance is at the emergent stage, not knowing how to price a procedure, how to give OPD, there is no actuarial data that's available for them to underwrite the healthcare risk. Now, so we are in a very unique situation. So far, this unique situation has taken us to 67 years of longevity. There are huge innovation, as Sailesh was talking about, is happening all over the world. Are we going to miss the bus by not organizing ourselves, either self-organizing or the policymakers organizing ourselves in a way that we are able to run a relay race by which we are able to pass the baton to each other to make sure the patient is at the center, who gets a maximum care and concern by which the person is able to live longer with a better quality of life. I had a chance to, in my earlier role, spend a bit of time in Japan and in China and in Korea. I used to attend this program called Japan Healthcare. This is called the Healthy Society Award. I met this gentleman, 110 years old, who was receiving the award. And the number of people like this in this conference room, average age is 90, 95, and about 80, many people are 80 and 85 industry leaders. And they were all looking good. They were all looking healthy. The whole population. The approach that they've taken in healthcare system, how each and every one, for example, in Japan, innovative products get the highest premium because they believe that innovative products, they find funds to support innovation products. At the end of the day, that innovative products make somebody who is suffering from gastric cancer, he doesn't die of gastric cancer. People, the high incidence of gastric cancer, now people don't die. Where the endoscopy has been made as a standard of care, at the age of 50, everybody goes through endoscopy. And everybody has a drug that is supposed to be given to them at a price or affordable within the insurance system. Now the question is that when we talk about India wanting to be a superpower, if we can't fix this, I don't think we will ever be able to think in terms of superpower not having a healthy people, like the way the dream that we should have, like Japan, where people live longer but are healthy. So it's very important, as somebody said, why America doesn't win relay race and France beats them. Individually, Americans win the race of 100 meters dash. The reason is very interesting. That's exactly the example that we need to take from them is the reward system that is given to each and every runner is so much, everybody wants to run the best of the timings. But when it comes down to handing over the baton, they don't stop to hand over the baton. The way in which the handing over the baton is done in a way, they maximize their ability to win the race. And because of the fact the incentives or awards are given for the team for having delivered the win, rather than people are selected based on their individual ability to beat the timings. Now, the biggest problem that we need to face, or we are facing and we need to solve, we need to work as one team, as Sailesh mentioned. We need to have this ecosystem. We need to engage, whether it's payers. I'm a member of the Health Insurance Council of Government of India. I represent the industry. And I can clearly see when I sit in that conversation, people who are underwriting the risk, they don't have an understanding of what they are underwriting. They know very well they are bleeding, so they want to cut the cost. I think there's a fundamental flaw in a way that a payer, not knowing how he is underwriting or how to underwrite a risk, actuarial data is not being collected because you know why? No provider or no pharma companies are having a conversation with them. They think the set of cheats are there on the other side whose job is to maximize their wealth, and that's why we deny claims, which I said that's absolutely not a way to change your industry. So very fundamentally, which I would talk about in my whatever the number of years, what I would do is to look at how do we get healthy India. I have an access. First and foremost, fundamentally, we need to figure out how to figure out access, financial access in the hands of people. Unless otherwise, we take leadership and taking the baton. Pharma industry is the last mile of healthcare delivery. We are at the end of the bullwhip. We can't afford to be played by somebody is doing the bullwhip and we get affected. Unless otherwise, we increase our area of concern to an area of influence of figuring out how do we get financial access to people so that people don't demand, give me cheap drug or the low price drug. Instead, they should be asking, give me quality drugs because I can afford. Today, people are saying, I've got 10 rupees, give me the best treatment. That's not a way healthcare has to be delivered. You can't have a healthy India. So this is something that we need to involve ourselves, find time, bring capabilities within our industry to make sure. And we have had a chance to speak to the PMO office in my role as a chairman of the Health Insurance Committee. And there is a possibility of a health insurance scheme is being launched by the Prime Minister in the years to come. It's almost in the final stage of the launch. And OPD is something that we are pushing for getting into it. Now, very important thing is we as an industry not just look at our price control. How do I manage one more price control doesn't come? Instead, we should change the direction of travel to how do I make sure my population gets money in their hand. So maybe that's one way of looking at it, apart from the day-to-day challenges of industry. Second is the future is biologics. If you really look at China, we are talking about per million people, researchers in R&D. In India, we have 147. This is in 2013. Quite obviously, there must have been slight improvement. China has got 1089. Country-wise, R&D expenditure as percentage of GDP, 0.85%. China is 2.1%. They're galloping. Biologics is going to be the new pharma industry area. Is there an opportunity for us to drive, helping the government to see how important it is to create jobs, being on the leading cutting edge of innovation? And India can play a big role, like how we are the pharmacies of the world. We should be also, if we don't do it, Korea is already on the job. China is already on the job. There are countries who are competing to be in this area. So it's very important that we need to be looking at this as one area. As Shailesh mentioned, partnering with the government, it's very important the government, various stakeholders need to understand what we bring to the table and how can we help the government priorities. And quite obviously, we as a team, leadership team in OPPI, we had a conversation to look at like how Shailesh was mentioning about antibiotic policy. We will be looking at one big signature program which OPPI stands for, and put all our energy behind it, efforts behind it, make sure we are seen as a big giver to the country and making a difference to the country. This is something which we will make an attempt to bring all the capabilities and competencies to make those big signature events come alive. Quite obviously, we need what we need for a healthy India, respect for innovation, which is fundamental. Till the time we continue to keep talking about how do I provide 10 paise tablets, which is definitely we need to do, for sure, for people who desire. But that's not the end of the game. If we really want to increase the longevity of the population, is in doing business. Now, the fundamental problem is, I'm not even sure that many of the members in the ecosystem know that we have a challenge in doing business. Sometimes people think that we are having a good time, but maybe it's a good idea to make them understand how it's important that government support is important for us to help the population. Ease of doing business is something that we'll be working on as part of our agenda. Fair trade practices. Many of our member companies, they bring huge innovation to this country. It's important that the member companies are well supported so that we are able to bring the right kind of innovation to this country, so the fair trade practices where we champion. Last but not the least, ethical and compliance system. I'm not even sure that people know how much of effort this industry body is putting behind wanting to be ethical and compliant. As the journey went, we have become more and more stricter and tougher in the way in which we do business. In fact, we make our life difficult for doing our own business. Forget about government. Through our own strict governance process and mechanism, it's important that the policymakers understand through our advocacy to make them understand that we are accountable, we are responsible in what we do. So again, India is a land of reality. We are not going to allow this whole amorphous, fluid, moving target as far as we are concerned. We are going to embrace this animal and make sure we understand what it takes to tame and make sure that we ride the animal in a way that patient, at the end of the day, get the benefit. So thanks very much, and looking forward to all your support, and my colleagues from the industry association, whether it's IPA and IDMA, will be terrific to have all three of the association working together and making the dream come alive for being a healthy India. Thank you very much.